Hi everyone, you're here starting with Cody. And in today's video, we are going to start working on block number 2 in our Sew Along, Quilt Along video series with using the Creative Grid Lazy Angle Ruler. So we've already constructed block 1, and now we're focusing on block 2 here. And again, you can see we're working with 5.5-inch squares to create this big 10.5-inch square. But remember, with the lazy angle ruler, we can create this square 6 different sizes. It's absolutely amazing. But the size we're going to be using today is going to be a finished 10.5-inch block. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure we have our 5.5-inch strips cut from our fabric A, fabric B, and fabric C, or like our background white fabric. So if you already have strips left over from the previous block, you can definitely use those. But just as a refresher, we're just going to cut more strips because we'll use them for other blocks as well. So here I've got my teal, which I do believe is fabric B, if I've been keeping track correctly. So we're going to cut our 5.5-inch strips. And I already have a nice cut finished edge. So I'm just going to line up my 5.5-inch marking on that ruler there. And then we're going to cut this strip here. So we've got that fabric. We're going to go to our background. And we're going to do the same. So now we've got our 3 strips, fabric A, B, and our background. So now we can go and start cutting our pieces from that. So that's when we'll go to our lazy angle ruler, and we're going to start cutting. So for this block, block 2, our big piece is going to be this one, which is fabric A. So from fabric A, we're going to need 4 of the large trapezoid pieces. So first, let's square up this edge here. So now we're going to cut. And remember, to create our big trapezoids, we have the ruler held like this. And we're going to use our 5.5-inch marking here. And that's going to line up with the left and the bottom side. And then we'll cut. So this is 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to rotate the ruler. And we're going to do the same thing here. Line it up right there with that 5.5-inch marking. So now we've got our 4 main pieces. So then we're going to go to our fabric B. And we'll trim this up, making sure to eliminate all that salvage. We never want salvage in the quilt. And so here we're cutting smaller trapezoids. So here we're using this one here. This is the line we're lining up with. So we line that up with this edge here and then the bottom edge here. And then we'll trim. And here we need 4 of these as well. And so that's how we cut our first one. So now what we can do is we can flip the ruler this way, use the back of the ruler, and we can line it up with the 5.5-inch here. So as we can see here, we're lining up the bottom edge, and then this side right here, and it'll give us a nice, and it's the top edge of the strip is lining up with the 5.5 inch marking here. So we just cut this side, and there we are. So now we've got 4 of these to go with our other 4 fabric A. So now we're going to cut the background fabric. So here we are going to need 8 pieces because there's 2 small little trapezoids per block. So we'll line it up just like we did with fabric B. And we'll cut. We'll flip the ruler. Line it up. And we'll cut. So we've got 2 blocks so far. And we'll flip the ruler. All right, so we've got all our pieces cut. So what we're going to do, so we've got our main piece here. So we're going to take one of these and we're going to sew it here. And we'll do that for all 4 of these pieces. So we can go like we've done in previous videos. Go and line that up here. And then I'm going to pin it. And again, the reason I like to pin is so I can take all these stacks to the sewing machine and everything's lined up where it needs to be. And especially on certain pieces, when you start putting them together, it makes it easier to ensure that you sew on the right side, on the correct side. It just takes all the guesswork out. You don't have to think. All right, so we'll take these to the sewing machine and we'll sew these all together. So here we are at the machine, and I always just want to point out the way we want to lay out our smaller trapezoid pieces on top of our big pieces when we're sewing is we always want to make sure we have a little bit of that little triangle, that little dog ear, or whatever you want to call it up here, because we really want kind of a 1/4 inch from here to here. So when we place this under our 1/4 inch foot, we want to make sure we're kind of starting from this section here. And then so when we get to the bottom, that will kind of end in this little section here. And that will just give us a very pretty block. So let's start sewing. So we can see here, let's see, hopefully you can. So you can see here, we're kind of starting right in that little intersection of where the white fabric and the pink fabric meet. And that's where we want to start sewing. So what it's going to do is going to give us a nice flat top and a flat bottom. So now we've got all our blocks chain pieced. So now we can trim, oh my goodness, we can trim these up. And then we're going to go take them to the iron and we're going to press them. And of course we're going to press our seams to the dark side. All right, let's go to the iron. Okay, so we've got our little blocks. So now we want to press these seams. And remember, we want to press them to the dark side. So we don't want to press them this way because then you'll see the seam underneath the lighter fabric. We want to press it the other way. So press it towards the dark side. So when we press it, we'll be able to not see that seam nearly as visible underneath the darker fabric. So let's go and press all of these blocks So remember, just press it to the dark side. And something to always make sure, try to remind everybody in each video, when you're pressing, make sure you're pressing it completely flat, because we don't want any of that fold of that fabric down and create like a little lip, because that's just going to distort your entire block and cause issues with alignment. All right, so we've got our blocks all pressed. So we're going to go over to the cutting board and trim up a little bit and cut these blocks again to attach another white piece. All right, let's go take a look. So here we are back at the cutting table. So you'll notice we've got these little dog ears at the ends. So we can trim those up. So what we'll do is you could just slice it, or if you want to be more careful, you can take your ruler and line it up with the edge and just trim off those little pieces. I like to work with clean blocks, and I like to clean them up at every stage just because it makes it easier. All right. So now what we're going to do, so we've got our blocks. So now we need to cut a piece off of this. So what we're going to do, we're going to use our lazy angle ruler again, and we are going to take our block. So it's the right side. We're going to flip it to the wrong side. And then we're going to take our ruler, line it up with the 5.5 inch marking again. And so we're going to line up the left and bottom side. So we've got 5.5 inches here, 5.5 inches here, and then we are going to trim this off here. So we're going to lop that off. And it's going to have a little blunt end, and that's just how it's going to look. So it's not going to come to a point anymore. So we take our block again, flip it. So your bottom right triangle, the large sides facing to the left. Line it up here. And trim. So now that you're done, you can flip them back this way. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our other white piece and we're going to sew it onto this side. So we're going to lay it just like this, just so we have that little bitty dog ear sticking up, and line up those cut angled sides, and we're going to pin. So if you're ever trying to second guess which way this should go, always butt it up and see how you can get a square, because this is what we're going for. This is the block we're going for right here. Because there are plenty of times when I'm trying to figure out a pattern or figure out a block, and it's best to just have your pieces cut and kind of lay them out before you ever go and sew it. It just makes it easier to visualize it. All right, let's go to the sewing machine. So we're at the sewing machine. So now we're just going to sew this down. So you can see we have the cut side all lined up to the white and the pink. And let's make sure we have a little ear here. And let's sew. All right, so now we just like always, we'll cut our little pieces that we chain sewed together, take out our pins, and we'll head over to the iron and press these seams. And so the way we're going to press them again is we're not going to press them this way. We're going to press so this is going backwards. So it's going towards the dark side, so you don't see that seam behind the lighter white fabric. So we'll go and we'll press all 4 blocks, and we'll meet back up at the cutting table. So now we're back at the cutting table. So we've pressed all of our seams. So they should look just like this. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take each little block, and the next step is basically we're going to cut it, but we're going to sew fabric B, the small trapezoid, on this side like this. And this is where our finished small block is going to look like. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this block in this orientation, and we're going to flip it this way. And then so here we're going to take our lazy angle ruler again. We're lining up with the 5.5 inch markings, and we're going to lay the left side and the bottom side along here, and we're going to trim. And we're going to do this for all 4 small blocks. But you can see what the block is going to look like. So let's cut the rest of them. So now we've got our small blocks. So now we're going to pin the small B trapezoid, or fabric B trapezoid, to this cut edge. And remember always to leave this little ear here, a little triangle off the edge. All right, so we've got them all pinned. So we're going to go sew them down, and we'll have our finished block. So here we're back to the cutting table. So we sewed this down, and then we pressed it to the dark side, which is fabric B. And this is our finished little block. So again, I'd like to go and trim that little piece there. And then what we'll do is we'll put these together. Super simple. So we'll trim that little dog ear out. So now we're going to assemble them. Or we're going to rearrange them, of course. So let's lay this here, this one here, and this one here. So that's what our finished block looks like. Super cool. So now we're going to lay this one over here and line up those edges. And we're going to pin, and then we'll come lay this one here, and we'll pin this together. So take this over to the sewing machine, sew this down, and we'll be right back. So I've got my pieces sewn together. We can see here. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to press to the dark side. So in this case, we're going to press the seam this way. In this case, we're going to press the seam this way. So it's primarily under the fabric B, that center fabric here, opposed to being under here at all. So then we're going to go to the sewing machine and sew this together. Super simple. So one thing I want to point out, one of the other reasons why, and why sometimes you may not be able to press to the dark side because it just may not be the best option, is like when we join two pieces like this, we always want this seam here to go one direction and this one up here to go the opposite direction. So what we're able to do is we're able to interlock them together just like that. So it's nice and flat, so the machine travels over it nicely, but most importantly is so when it's sewn together, those seams line up beautifully. You'll see when I come back with them sewn together. So take it to the sewing machine, sew this down, and we'll be done. And I'll meet you back at the iron. So we're back at the ironing board. So I have my seam all sewn. So we'll open it up and we'll look. So by interlocking those seams, you can see how you get a nice, perfect junction. Everything meets beautifully in the center. So what we're going to do here, because we've got seams going all over the place, is in this case, to get it to lay nice and flat, I like to press my seams open. So we'll open up the seam, and we'll come and we'll press them open. It just allows the big block to lay nice and flat, opposed to having a bulky seam going one way or the other. And that's it. We've done it. We created our 10.5-inch block. And this is block 2 in our quilt along. So hopefully y'all had as much fun making it as I did. And stay tuned for next week's block 3. It's another fun one. Actually, it's super easy. It's probably the easiest block that we'll do in this whole series. So as always, if you enjoyed the video, if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel. Check my Instagram page. And remember, all of the patterns, or basically all the instructions, are all written out with plenty of pictures on my blog, which the link is in the description below. And so you can watch the video as many times as you need, but I do have written instructions. So make it, once you have watched the video, obviously, you'll be able to go there and you can print out the PDF file and follow along with that, so you don't have to watch the video 1,000 times to try and remember every step and what cuts we need to make and how many cuts. All right, so see you next week for the next block, and as always, happy sewing.